what are you getting out of putting your black ass child in proximity to white people, especially at a young age? Because if we said if the goal of white supremacy is to erode the soul, what do you think's happening to your children when you subjugate them to ostracization and racism at such a young age? They're like formative years they're spent trying to assimilate with racist. Because if you think they ain't being called a nigger at school, you're out of your fucking mind. You subjecting your kids to racism at such a young age when it's not necessary because you think the education is better. And is it a better education, or do they just have better amenities?
It's just better amenities.
And how is the education better if the whole educational system is based off of lies and propaganda? What are you expecting? A better education? No, you just think that ice is colder. That's what they think. Yeah. They think the closer you are to white people, the better you are, the more equal you'll be. But how the fuck you gonna be equal to people that deemed you 3/5 of a human? How? How does that work? Explain that math to me. Niggas turned you into a fraction of a person. And you standing in front of them whole. And you remove them completely from blackness. They don't have black neighbors. None of their teachers is black. Oh, you think your child at school causing trouble? No, they're being singled out. Because these people are fucking racist. You just put them in proximity. And I've heard all these different stories about people like having to being subjected to so much racism. That's going to traumatize your child for the rest of their life. So, for the only way for them to have a good experience is to go along. So they have to remove their dignity. They have to remove their pride because you're severely outnumbered. You can't fight everybody. And the more fights you get into, the more of a problem you are. When you're already seen as a problem to begin with. Now, I understand you're making a little money. You're making a little money and you want your child to have a better education. It's just more resources. That's really what it is. You know, when we go to the poorer schools, they lack resources. They lack funding. Kids have a rougher at home life, so they come to school to express whatever frustration they can't express at home. But better?
No, it's not better.
I mean, this is America. What do you want them in you want them in a nice, clean classroom with a whole bunch of amenities so they could just learn the lies better? So they can learn the propaganda a little better? Because they ain't gonna have no goddamn opinion. And then they grow up and you put them around all these goddamn white people. You remove them from all the blackness, and then you expect them to have black excellence? That ain't how that work. No, it's not better. What you saying is white people are better. In a nutshell, it's not a better education. You just think that being around more white people makes you better, and it'll make your kid better.
My oldest daughter was going to private school. So one day, of course, me, she lives with me. So every day I drop her off in school. Her mother pick her up because we live by each other. Drop her off, pick her up. So, when you go to the parent-teacher conference, I went. And I come to find out my daughter is the only black kid in her class. I said, we can't do this. So I put her in public school. And my daughter was uncomfortable. And I felt bad. And to this day, I still feel bad about that. My daughter going to school being the only black kid in her class. I feel bad about that. And my daughter kept on, sometimes, her mother was telling me certain things like, yo, she wasn't being treated right. I'm like, what? That school is good school. What are you talking about? Then I finally had a chance to go. I'm like, oh, shit, no wonder. She's feeling uncomfortable.
I wanted to sleep, but I literally had to let rage burn through my body for the last hour after seeing a video that Deontay Kyle posted with the Grits and Eggs podcast talking about putting black children in white schools. And if you followed me for a time, that's a topic I've discussed at length because it's a huge part of my lived experience. It's unfortunate because I really want to riff about the whole array of emotions that kind of experience leaves in your body, especially rage. But I think of all of the emotions, rage is the one that I am granted the least amount of room to express as a black man. I could make a video right now that would make a lot of sense to a lot of people and resonate, and people would be like, oh, that was a great point. I don't want to make any fucking sense right now. Let me say that much very clearly. It is psychological torture It is psychological torture to put a black child through those kinds of experiences. And of all the array of emotions and traumas and scars internally and externally, literally, that it leaves on someone's body, rage seethes the most. And if it is allowed to touch open air and it elicits a scream from the person that it has scarred, it will trip them up. Instantaneously, it will get them in huge trouble. And so the only way that someone is able to make it all the way through this kind of gauntlet, if you will, is if they completely internalize that rage. It is truly a miracle that I did not unalive myself as a child. I'm not even kidding. The amount of times that parents, students, faculty tried to trip me up, set me up, probe me into reacting in a certain way so that I could be scapegoated. I almost resent my ability to convey ideas effectively because it's a fucking survival tactic. Something about Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech always rubbed me the wrong way. Like, even as a child. And looking back, I actually really resent some of the things that Martin Luther King had to say, despite his good intentions and all of his good deeds. I wish I had been told that there was a place for my anger, that there was a place for my rage, that there was a place for me to be irrationally angry. Everyone around me in my entire life, in every single context, has always had the benefit of my civility and cool-headedness, except for me. Because that's what Martin Luther King's nonviolence really teaches you. When you can put it in conversation with this, I have a dream of seeing all of these multi-ethnic children at the same lunch table. What you are teaching black children is to turn themselves into a receptacle for all of the hate and violence that this country amasses on a daily basis, in the same way that it amasses garbage and dumps it on the shores of Ghana or Indonesia or wherever the fuck. It is damn near impossible to sustain life in a vacuum, and yet here we are, all 8 billion of us, on this little blue rock. Analogously, it is almost impossible to imagine someone growing up into someone with a sense of self-expression, self-worth, and let alone self-love. A black person who has lived through that kind of experience and has grown up in that kind of environment. And yet here I am. And I thank God, I thank myself for the awareness required at such a young age, the sensitivity to recognize, at least in part, all of the things that were going on, and develop curriculums for myself over the course of my childhood and my young adult life to address all of the psychological damage that was incurred or occurred. Bro, there are so many people I should have beat the shit out of. There are so many people I should have told to go fuck themselves every single day. I can't even imagine what my experience would have been like if that's the way I chose to move through the world, or let alone what kind of person I would be like if that's the way that I learned to engage with everybody on a daily basis. But that's what it would have required to appropriately address everything that I experienced on a daily basis in so many of these environments. It's from that lived experience that I tell you with a certain conviction that I think you can only get from seeing what is supposedly the greener grass on the other side. It all has to go. It all has to go. People set these parameters and follow these threads of logic up to the point of their own comfort and no further. And you see that across the board. It's an empathy issue. It's a logic issue. They're the same thing. And that's the big issue. Like, that's what people don't understand. Empathy is logic. That is logic. And if you can't take this situation you're in and see the way that you are the perpetrator of the exact same thing that you think you're railing against, you are not logical. Because you're not empathetic. Secret hopes deeply planted, sometimes invisible, that stow away with you wherever you go. Somewhat tangential, but you'll see people all the time talk about, oh, I hate Nepo babies, etc., etc. And then the same people will be like, I can't wait to give my kids everything, you know, my kids will want for... Up to the point that they want to reach and no further. Yet another analogy, infinite sympathy and empathy for victims, none for monsters. Where did the monsters come from? That makes people uncomfortable. I know it's uncomfortable. All of these topics are uncomfortable, but it's the fact that people want to split these things down the middle when they are a smearing of black and white that makes it so foolhardy. It's trying to apply these binary concepts to a very, very spectral world that makes all of this shit dumb. And that's why I tell you that the whole thing has to go. Are you empathetic with your demons, with the demons of others? I don't trust anyone that's not talking to demons, because if you're not seeing the full picture and you're blinded. You're dangerous. And I think that's the issue, is everyone is categorizing something in the demon category, and it is creating a weakness that is waiting to metastasize. And within the context of this country, there is no shortage of blind spots that are metastasizing. In fact, I would say that the whole damn thing has metastasized at this point. And I don't even care if that doesn't make sense to you. I'm telling you, it all has to go. And that's scary to people because they don't want to let go of their context. They don't want to lose their frame of reference, because how can you exist in a vacuum? But I'm telling you, you can exist in a vacuum. Yourself is an illusion. And that's where it gets too woo-woo for people, but it's all spiritual. Like sociology, it's... See, I don't even want to make sense. Like, this is why I don't make videos anymore, because it's like, I don't even want to try to make sense or like constrict these concepts into a consumable form. It's just the reality. It is through a crucible of violence that we inevitably will pass, not as a race, not as a country, as a species. Because our sense of self will have to be completely eviscerated for us to finally be willing to pursue higher concepts. We have to let go of the tangible things that we are using to frame our reality. Again, I don't care if this does not make sense to you. That's what it is. A similar experience in the sense that I stopped going to private school in the 3rd grade because in the 2nd grade, I started exhibiting pointed signs of depression, anxiety, specifically OCD. And I mean to the level of self-harm ideations and OCD tics, as in like physical flinching and pattern behavior. Like if I touch one mailbox, I have to touch all 3, as well as looping, intrusive, and self-deprecating thoughts. I was extremely depressed and literally did not want to be alive on a regular basis. And those kind of things, especially in your formative years, stick with you. So I petitioned my family, as I often did, with an essay to move me out of private school and into public schools. It's from that experiential background that I tell you, once again, it is not enough. It's not enough. But I'll get back to that. I think some of the most pointed racism that you'll experience in those kinds of environments is going to happen in those elementary school years because people haven't learned to hide it yet. I'm going to keep talking after, but watch this video first.
White.
Why is he the dumb child?
Because he has dark brown skin.
Why is she the bad child?
Because she makes fun of everybody else's skin color.
How much do kids learn from what they see and hear from adults?
Kids have not learned to hide it yet, and adults think that the kids they are being racist towards cannot perceive it. But my first experience perceiving anti-black racism was my first day of kindergarten. The first day. Because upon moving to still predominantly white but ultimately more diverse public schools, what I found is it's not just white people who are anti-black. And in fact, the most pointed anti-black racism that I observed was from non-black, non-white people of color. But the people in my comments or people in Deontay's comments saying, oh, you just got to find a balance, it's important to balance it out. No, attending a black church was not an effective solution. Seeing your family however many times a year was not an effective solution. It is a holistic environmental issue that is a branch off of this country's central issue. You got to understand, my mom was among the first kids here in New York to be bused into white schools out in Canarsie. She and her siblings were literally chased under buses by adults with sticks and baseball bats, spat on when they were going to school. But at the very least, they would come home and they would be in Bed-Stuy or they would be in Flatbush. And this was all government facilitated in the name of this dream of integration and upward mobility. But integration without effective reconciliation or reformations. And the adage, time heals everything, is false. Time is just an ingredient, and what it does to your experience is completely dependent on how you use it. And this country has not used its time since the civil rights movement, since the Civil War, effectively. It has been incubated more than it's been inoculated, if by virtue only of the fact that it's in the system like microplastics now, and it's hard to remove it. It's just like integrated with the entire body. But yeah, the amount of hate that I was subjected to as a child and the ways that I watched the manifestations of that hate morph as I grew older make me pointedly aware of what's probably going on in someone when I look in their eyes. Like I can see their foundations. I swear it's like I can see people's inner child in their adult versions. And I know you, and I know what your parents taught you, and I know what you said amongst yourselves, and I know what you did to kids like me. Because it never leaves your eyes, or the pauses between your words, or your micro expressions, or your body language. I learned to read people as a survival tactic, and now I can't stop reading people. And it's hard when you actually are reading everything that's going on because you realize that it all has to go. You realize how rotten it is to the core, this place, I mean. And on the other side of things, if you haven't had that lived experience and you still have these aspirations and you think, oh, it's just a matter of balancing out, and if they read C.L.R. James, or if they read Maya Angelou enough, or if we celebrate Kwanzaa, or we do X, Y, and Z, or you have an aspiration of, you know, I want to do X, Y, and Z in the corporate world, and I want this and I want that. You're corrupt a man's heart with a gift. That's how you find out who you're dealing with, right? I love that lyric. Malware is in the desire. and you're not willing to let go of the desire, so you will never get rid of the malware. And you think you can convince yourself that you have, and it's at that moment that it will activate for you or for your children or for your children's children. And again, I think that's the scary thing, because there's people watching this who are looking for a bad guy. They're looking for some simple narrative that they can latch onto. It's like, yeah, that's why I always, side-eyed people who had this experience, or like, you're no better. Or even the white people that you're like, these people are so full of hate and X, Y, and Z. Yes, they are. It's the same system. It all has to go. It all has to be eviscerated. I'm not even kidding. If you follow whatever thread of logic you've decided to pick up in this convoluted clusterfuck of a country and follow it all the way to its end, it will always arrive right back at you. Now, later, or in the past. That's why I always say this country needs therapy for religious psychosis. The American dream is a cult. Our entire sense of self collectively and individually must be deconstructed after recognizing that we are in a cult. And we then must go on a spiritual journey, both individually and collectively, of self-actualization and detachment from the identity markers that we're still holding onto and that are ultimately the source of our suffering. I'm basically talking about Buddhism, the pursuit of anatta, and nirvana, which again, I think are very scary concepts for people to even engage with, because when you really understand what nirvana is, it means to blow out. It means extinguish, over. And in the same way that increasingly more young Americans have difficulty sitting with silence, with nothing, with uncertainty, the dead space, the Tao, if you will. I think we're afraid to let go of our faith, to put our faith in nothing, which is to put our faith in everything. It's the recognition that they're the same thing, that by letting go of your identity, you are actually embracing the wholeness of reality. This is further complicated by the fact that people who are saying the things that I'm basically saying right now often do so very toxically. They're trying to get people to detach from these identity markers and don't recognize the ways that their privilege is allowing them to let go of those identity markers to an extent, one, but two, the ways that their privilege is causing them to hold on to identity markers without having an awareness of it. That becomes their blind spot. There are material consequences to our material world, and people try to just skip past it all and be like, oh, you have to let go of everything, and just like, none of this stuff is real. You start at the root in the physical and you work your way up through all of these things. When someone of any lived experience in any capacity tries to buy into this cult to any degree, they're opting to be made a vessel of violence. And if by some chance in that process, in that soul bleaching crucible, be it a corporate office, a college classroom, the bedroom, wherever it is, by some chance during that chemical reaction, they see, oh, this is all an illusion. They feel disillusioned with it and decide to let go. What must be realized is that they have skipped all of the stuff from the root to the top. They are completely baseless. And if they go around preaching, you have to let go of everything, and they have no root, you've done no root work, you are lost. You are lost, and you are ultimately just perpetuating the same cycle. And that is just one of the many ways that this kind of cult reifies itself, or rather this cancer reifies itself within all of us in a myriad of ways far too complex to ever cover in one video. I say all that to say, you think that you've let go, but there's a stowaway on your ship and you are carrying it with you, and it will metastasize, it will spread. And that is how this system survives over and over again. And that is why the whole thing has to My
3-year-old has expressed to me that she don't feel safe around white kids, and I don't know what to do about it. Are y'all talking to y'all toddlers about race? Because I am. I had to have a conversation with my 3-year-old the other day that I thought was not going to be something we discussed for years. Story time. Y'all know my 3-year-old is in daycare, and she goes to a Montessori. Now, me personally, I grew up in a black-ass neighborhood, black-ass schools, black-ass teachers. Like, I didn't realize that my circumstances were unique until I was an adult. I didn't realize that not every kid gets to see themselves reflected in their educators their entire life. It wasn't until I got to be an adult that I realized a lot of black people don't grow up with black teachers, black administrators, black principals, learning about African-American history and things like that in school as a requirement. I mean, we even in elementary school had black academic challenges, which was like Jeopardy with all black information. I didn't know that this was something different. So fast forward to me as a mom, I made the conscious decision to put my daughter in a daycare that was diverse. I wanted her to be comfortable in rooms with kids that don't look like her, from all different backgrounds, different economic statuses, different races, different languages. I wanted her to have that experience because as an adult, when I got into the workforce, there was many times where I was the only black person in the room, and I had to stand firm in that. And so I wanted her to have that growing up so that when she got in those situations, she would be comfortable. So now my child is one of now 3 black kids in her class. There was more. There was one that was her very best friend. She's gone. Another one that was a little boy that was her very best friend. He's now gone. And unfortunately, he left while my daughter was sick, so she didn't get to say goodbye, which really had her upset. This is when we started to have a problem. She came to me when she went back to school and realized that he was gone, and said that another little girl, who was a little white girl, came up to her and told her, he's never coming back, you're never going to see him again, so you should just get over it. And my baby's feelings was hurt. So then, fast forward again to gym. Her teacher tells me she's no longer playing with the other kids in gym class, and I couldn't understand why. So I asked her, Mir, why aren't you playing with the other kids in gym? She said, I do. I play with Kelly. If Kelly is there, she's in another teacher's class. I said, oh, tell me about Kelly. This is the conversation that changed everything for me. I said, tell me about Kelly. And the first thing out of my child's mouth was, she's brown like you and me, mama. I said, okay. I didn't say, what does she look like? I said, tell me about her. She said, oh, because she's brown like me and you, mama, she's a safe friend. So I play with her when she's there. When she's not there, I don't have a safe friend. Instead, I just play with the teacher. Keep in mind, y'all, the teacher is black as well. So it wasn't the fact that there wasn't other kids available or that she just didn't feel close to anybody. It's that she's identifying that people that look like her are safe. She's 3. Now, this may not seem like a big deal to some people, but as a black person, as a black woman, and as a mother, the thought that my child doesn't feel safe around people that don't exactly look like her really bothered me, because that was my whole reason for putting her in this particular school, was so that she will feel comfortable in any space. So I asked her, why do you say that Kelly is your only safe friend? She said, because the other kids speak mean to each other, and they're very mean to me. They play too rough, and they're not kind. So I just play with a safe friend. Now, I know I'm going to have people in the comments that say, oh, well, kids can be mean. It may have nothing to do with race. But it's the fact that my 3-year-old felt the need to say to me that she felt safe with people that looked like her, that sent my spidey senses going and said, okay, I have to do something about this. I have to figure this out, but I also have to have a conversation with my child. So I did. I explained to her that safety doesn't necessarily come from a particular skin tone, that you can have people that are unsafe of any race. But to be honest, I do get where she's coming from, that she feels safer amongst her own. I just do. I mean, can we look at the state of the world and say any different? I told her that it's her job to be kind no matter what someone looks like, no matter what their background is, no matter what their color is. She is only responsible for herself, and as an individual, she needs to be kind to those that are kind to her. But baby, I didn't think I was going to have to start having these conversations so young. And then I started thinking about other interactions that she has had with kids that look like her and kids that don't. And the reality is, she's more comfortable with kids that are brown. Now, don't get in these comments and say nothing crazy, because I'm not 1 and the 2. All right, she's 3. But you can't just completely ignore the fact that with her own eyes and in her own little 3 years of experience, this is what the world has taught her. The world has taught her, not at home, because I got friends of every color, baby, and we all get down. The world has taught her that there are people that don't look like her that are going to treat her differently. And I observed it in the classroom. There are kids, white kids in her class, that speak to their parents all kinds of crazy, speak to other kids crazy, and they are physically abusive to each other, and it doesn't get reprimanded and it doesn't get corrected. I've watched parents watch their children do some very unsavory things and just say, oh, well, they're just being kids. No, that has to be guided, that has to be corrected. You can't allow them to do these things, but they do. So then I had to make the executive decision with my husband, of course, to move my baby, and I'm sad about it, because she loved her daycare at one point, but I will not leave her in an environment where she does not feel safe and she does not feel celebrated. Now, her current school is not celebrating Black History Month. They have done nothing to educate these kids about the many, many people of color that have contributed to this society. So she's not getting it there. She, of course, gets it at home. But just the overall idea that she's so aware of the fact that there are differences between how she can behave and how others can behave, how she treats others and how they treat her, all based on what she looks like. I mean, I've even had adults on this app point out the fact that my child was dark skinned, and so she's going to be different. So, I mean, it's a lesson she's going to have to learn, but why does she have to learn it so young? So y'all tell me, are y'all raising y'all kids to be kind to everybody? Are y'all pointing out race to them in a small age? Like, what are y'all doing? Because this really had me bothered. Like, I don't want her to be upset every day when she goes to school, but I also don't want to ignore the fact that we do live in America, and so this is prevalent. So y'all help me out. What are y'all doing? What are y'all saying? We are changing her daycare to a predominantly Black daycare, where they are actually talking about all the Black history facts and all of those things. So I'm letting her follow in my footsteps, so to speak, but just help me out. What are y'all doing? I need some guidance, because I don't want my baby just growing up blind, but I also don't want her unprepared. So y'all get in the comments.